everyone. Open heart, open mind. Welcome to the Satwa channel, an online official platform of the Satwa project. I'm Samiksha. So today we are going to have a new dialogue session, which is a part of our Dharma or Drama series. So before we begin our session, let me thanks Brother Ray, who is managing everything behind the scene. Brother Ray, would you please like to come on the screen?
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. Please help us giving us a like and sharing this video. If you are watching this on YouTube, do subscribe to our channel. Now back to you.
Thank you, Brother Ray. So as usual, before we begin our series, let me introduce you to our moderator. So today's moderator is Brother Raymond. Raymond is a senior writer at Buddhist Tour Global. He has been a Chinese Buddhist layman since 2008 and began working for the Buddhist Tour organization in 2010. An alumnus of the School of Oriental and African Studies and the University of Queensland, he is a trustee of the Haythrop Association. Thank you for joining us, Brother Raymond, today.
Hello, thank you for having me tonight.
So our first contributor is Venerable Tenzin Peljor. Bhikshu Tenzin Peljor is the leader of our meditation weekend. He has been studying Buddhism since 1995 and was fully ordained as a monk by His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 2006. From 2008 to 2013, he studied the Master Program of Buddhist Studies in Italy at the Institute Lama Tsongkhapa. For many years, he was a resident monk and board member at the Bodhicharya Buddhist Center Germany in Berlin and is a teacher at Tibet House Germany in Frankfurt. He is involved in social and interfaith work. Among other things, Tenzin Peljor runs various websites and blogs and is a board member of the German Buddhist Monastic Order, as well as a council member of the German Buddhist Union, TPU. Thank you so much, Venerable, to join us today.
Thank you. Nice to see and meet you.
So our next contributor is Michael Nolan. Michael is a former monk and musician who grew up in Australia and spent several years in the United States. He completed a Bachelor of Science at the University of Queensland with majors in physics and computer science. After university, Michael worked in computing and also pursued a career as a professional musician. He became interested in Buddhism and took refuge in the Theisms at a temple of the Fo-Guang-Shan order from Taiwan. He later studied with the Rigpa group and was ordained as a Getsul monk in Nepal with Trulshik Rinpoche, who was the head of the Nyingmapa school of Tibetan Buddhism at the time. After 14 years with Rigpa, Michael left the group and disrobed, citing concern about abuse and cultic tactics. He has since lived in Thailand and Australia and written about his experiences recovering from and making sense of the abuse he experienced within the Tibetan Buddhist community. Michael is currently writing a work intended to help people thrive despite spiritual marketing and to remove the stigma of asking important questions before committing to a spiritual teacher or community.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Michael. Thank you for joining us today. So, having done my task, I hand over the program to Brother Raymond.
Well, thank you so much for having me and having us tonight. For those of you who might have been part of our last stream, I recall it was a couple of weeks ago, we were setting the scene for a discussion about the issues within Buddhism that I think we all have a stake in to discuss honestly about and to come to terms with and grapple with, and more importantly, figure out potential solutions for. Now, last time we discussed the idea of celibacy, which we maintain is within the mainstream tradition of Buddhism, a central concept that is part of a broader package of monastic commitment and remains extremely important to mainstream Orthodox Buddhism. Now, the title of tonight's talk is a little different. is Diffi.Cult Struggles in Buddhism. And so, apart from the play on words, this is, in my opinion, an indicator that that what we will discuss tonight involves elements of the cultic, involves elements of what can be considered a distinction from what we see, what we hope to be orthodox or mainstream Buddhism. So what is a cult? What is popularly understood as a cult? I just looked to Wikipedia for a quick definition, which it defines as a term considered pejorative for a relatively small group, typically led by a charismatic and self-appointed leader who excessively controls its members, requiring unwavering devotion to a set of acts and practices which are considered outside the norms of society. Now, cult as a definition is quite fluid. And so apart from that very basic definition, I think there are many contentions for the definition exactly of a cult. But when you think of a cult, what do you think of in your head? I would like to pose this question to our guests tonight, and I would like to sort of start picking at their brains about what we are facing in Buddhism when it comes to cultic behavior, when it comes to practices that could be considered cultic, and whether these practices are, unfortunately, more mainstream or becoming more mainstream than we think or than we hoped. So if I may, could I start with Tenzin? Tonight we are talking about the Diffi.Cult struggles in Buddhism. To you, what sets apart cultic behavior, just in general, from what you think is a proper or orthodox expression or healthy expression of Buddhism?
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you also for the introduction and moderation. And first of all, maybe I just should say, as part of transparency, that I was member of 2 Buddhist cults. And my teachers were basically extremely narcissistic and also extremely sectarian, which doesn't deny they have qualities too, and that I learned a lot from them. So now, to answer your question about what makes for me a cult, I think the teaching of the Buddha should support you to liberate your mind from attachment, aversion, hostility, pictures of an enemy, and so on. But what the Buddhist cults, or the cults, do in general, they increase your attachment towards the cult and their doctrinal system, and they increase the aversion, the picture of an enemy, and even the hate towards everything which is outside the cult. They make you, instead of making you more free, they make you more and more dependent for your salvation on the group leader, the group, and outside of the group is a big danger or confusion, better to avoid it. This is, and then also they tend to use all your resources, your financial resources. They have methods to get access to them. Then you give them, of course, freely, but they have their tactics that you give it freely. First, they might ask you for a loan, then they don't pay it back, and so on. Then they ask you for your working power, and then even they might ask you to give all your time, more time that you initially want to commit to the cult, to the group. And at the end, you end in a situation where you have to work almost day and night. You give all your time resources, all your financial resources, all your human resources, everything. And you don't have much space to reflect your own situation. And then because they also increase hostilities towards sources outside of the cult, like there is a danger in the outside world, danger in your family, danger with maybe other traditions or Buddhist teacher, because they could confuse you. And so they bind you more and more towards the leader and the group and make it almost impossible to leave the group, because if you leave the group, you are not only a loser, actually outside there can be no salvation. So this is my experience with cult. And I know the term is applied differently, as you already suggested, and people might have a different experiences too. And that's why there are also different lists in how to distinguish if your group has cultic tendencies or not. So you find different lists, and then it's also sometimes helpful to read the different lists and then to check for yourself which applies to your situation. Thank you. This is basically what I have to share here to answer your question.
Thank you so much, Tenzin. And those are some fantastic definitions. I'm making notes myself now, and that is a very thorough list of what we could start to move toward defining as cultic behavior that traps someone inside their system. Michael, can we move on to you? What would you see as cultic behavior that sets apart from what you would hope as orthodox or mainstream?
Okay, so that was an excellent start, and I would say everyone can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Because I've got a little bit slow internet, breaking up. But there's a lot of different cultic techniques or strategies to bring about what Tenzin's talking about, like to gather those resources and reinforce those, that we're working harder and harder for either some noble purpose, which turns out to be less noble later on. So there's a lot of what I would call vagueness going on. Like you tend to find the same platitudes and wisdom being pulled in from all directions, but it's not. It often these narcissistic type teachers are very good at avoiding being very precise and intellectual, or at least some of the time, most of the time, they want to guide you so that you decide, and thus kind of program your own mind towards their purposes, which are for you to be loyal and contribute. But a cult can also exist like with a small inner circle, and then have kind of graduated steps towards you want to be part of that, especially when you're like new and inspired. You get told these are the role models that you should become like, and they get a lot of promotion often. This person's really good, and you should listen to him and be like him, because it's like a suggestion. It's for you, So then people in Rigpa particularly, they would like the big thing with them is why we're not a cult, right? So they give you a false definition of what a cult is, so that they can bypass being caught for being one. So they would say, for example, you're free to go anytime you want, without talking about the psychological stigma that they'll impose upon you if you do, or you really are, and there is no cost. But they would say, oh, cults are full of misfits and people with psychological problems. They're not high, whereas it's not true. That cults are full of high functioning, often very educated people, doctors, professors, judges, politicians, people from the central bank were in our, cult, and probably many of them still are. So for me personally, I could sense many cultic things, and I was aware of the potential, but I was also unable to really detect, because I was like thinking to myself that these are very, these people are more intelligent than I am, more educated. Surely they must know what a cult is. Whereas later I would talk to them and it's almost like there's a stigma to even know what a cult is. They don't want you to talk about it. So nobody seems to talk about it. And so this vagueness, it exists in a vague way. It's like, and wisdom is used from, not just from Buddhism, but anything that is useful to get the goal, which is loyalty, devotion, and all the things like in the Mahayana sense, all the perfections.
Yeah.
We want to train in them, but then they want you to train in them for their benefit. Like we will be generous to us, be devoted to us, be compassionate to us. We'll help you train by being the center of all your focus. So that took me a long time to understand. So I hope that last thing is useful insight.
Tenzin, did you have something to? Thank you.
Yes.
Tenzin, do you have something to add? I saw you.
Yes, I get immediately engaged when I listen to you, Mike, because it resonates so much with my experience. And I want to add a little bit. You said, the loyalty, and part of the loyalty is what they often call empire building. A narcissistic guru needs a big empire to show his achievements. And to run the empire, you need all those employees, which are badly paid, but do it most often free of. I mean, it's karma yoga or whatever. And so you have a lot of activities to run the empire, and people tend towards exploit themselves. And then another term you used is vag. And I found a very good description for the functioning of cults or the underlying pattern of cults in Stephen Hassan, who said, cults are the realms of fussiness. I really like it. It brings it very to the point, because there is some truth, but some is not really true. And as a newbie, you don't know, you might feel, but you cannot really put a word or a label on it. And then
you can't put your finger.
You just swallow it. And and part of what a cult makes with you, first of all, they undermine your intuition. You have a natural intuition, this is right or wrong, and then they tend towards to undermine your intuition by giving you Buddhist teachings like your perception is not reliable because you have the mind poisons, and so we perceive reality wrong, which is true in some way not, and then that's why you cannot rely on your perception. But the guru, he is enlightened, he knows, but you are the deluded being, and then so gradually your self-trust is undermined, your self-esteem is undermined, your trust in your own intuition is undermined. You become an incompetent source, and the guru is the only competent source. And this process then undermines your capability to distinguish right from wrong. And this is also based on not knowing much about Buddhism to have the capability to really know what is right or wrong. And this combined with the fussiness makes it very, very hard for a person who is in the midst of a cult to realize I'm in the midst of a cult. This is basically what I wanted to add. Michael, does this make sense to you?
And very embarrassed when they do figure it out. Yeah, when they do figure it out, they're very embarrassed. It makes another big obstacle.
You're right. I think as we talk about this, I think it's important to emphasize that a cult is intentionally, as you say, vague in how it implements and enforces its practices. One of the things it does best is to blur very much sort of the line between what a religious seeker hopes to feel, the religious devotion, and to transform their life and to become spiritually liberated and to become a more authentic human being. But the cult, as I understand it, takes this energy, takes this intention, and funnels it to itself, to the leader, to the narcissist, and misdirects the energy and intention of a genuine religious seeker into a system that it then has interlocking, ideas and ways of conditioning that make it very hard for an average person to escape. I think what I'd like to discuss with you is and this is going to be a little bit sensitive, but now that we have defined some of the characteristics of cultic behavior, may I ask each of you where you encountered some of these cultic inclinations or practices within your own religious life? Can we start with Tenzin? And you've already started alluding to this, so I think it'll be no problem.
No, I would prefer if Michael, because then we have a little bit like, if Michael can start, I would.
Michael, please go ahead. No problem. Sorry, Michael, please.
I get to go first this time. Okay, cool. I think I could start anywhere. There's so many places where I saw things that I thought were unethical, but then I had to have them Dharma explained to me, like, why is this wrong? There's constantly interactions with students who are well informed enough to know about sort of the global level of ethical standards. Like teachers shouldn't impose their will upon their students in a sort of a personal relationship because they've got more authority. Is an ethical thing. But then it doesn't take very long for a student to say, but then why are you in a relationship with all these beautiful women over here that are attending to you and going in the car with you and going home with you, caring for cooking and cleaning and all these things and first they'll like, you might misunderstand. You might think he's wearing robes. This is one of my pet peeves, right? He's wearing robes, so at least he's like he's taking on the appearance of a spiritual path, which is what the taking on the appearance is an important thing. It's like saying, I'm wearing these robes because I have vows, and I have to you need to maintain space so I can keep those vows, for example. And then you don't really know what a guru is in the Nyingma school particularly. So people come and they say, well, what's going on in the end? He's ready for this confrontation. He's welcoming it because it's his chance, a strong personality kind of teacher, to crush you in front of everyone for daring to question, but also answer your question in a compelling way. So some people will leave and give up, and because it's too much for them, but other people will become convinced by the explanation, which is something like, well, these are my close students, and we have a connection in for example, the Vajrayana Buddhist sense, and they have ritual kind of practices that they do for their master as part of their training. And because I am the master, I assume that role. I don't want them to take care of me. I like to take care of myself, but because they need someone to do that to generate merit, I let them take care of me. And then that extends that in a vague way into the other relationship aspects or overly familiar. And they might say, I'm not a monk, really. And then they make out about the Nyingma school. Well, actually, most of the monks got killed a long time ago. Not that long, a couple of kings after, like Trisen Detsen, they had this king Lang Dharma, and then he went around killing all the monks. So there was only lay people left to practice the Nyingma tantric Buddhism. So it's more of a lay kind of Buddhism, which is I don't know if that's really true, but that's the way it's explained often. So then we have monks, but it's not really our way, you know. And then then it starts to sort of set itself up as a bit of a new religion in that way, because it's an open slather for him to like define what it is. And that's a very cultic thing too, is that they're revealing from their wisdom nature all kinds of new teaching. But then people say, so this must be this must be something that actually comes from the wisdom mind of the past masters and reincarnate lamas and so on. So basically, when someone confronts with a very straightforward ethical question, and then they get all of this big cultural thing and layers of what vows do I really hold, and they have Adriana vows, so they need a master to practice them, and I need to play my part, and all this. It diffuses the question into nothingness. And some people, you have to be very strong to say, but no, I want to know why. Where is this line? What are you allowed to do and not allowed to do? And if you start doing that, typically the master will be like, well, you should just shut up. And maybe this isn't for you, get out. But if you want to stay and get enlightened and not be a fuckwit, sorry for me. That's what they used to say. So I'm giving you the experience, right? They would insult you with expletives like that. Then you could stay. But if you want to throw your life away, and you're one time in 100,000 lifetimes opportunity that you get these teachings, then you'll have to stay, and we'll show you how it goes. So I try to be as realistic as I could with that. Apologies to everyone if I use the rude words, but that is the reality of cults. They shock you, like that.
And there are explicit similarities with emotional abuse when they make these like sort of proclamations, like when you talk about victims of domestic abuse or abusive partnerships, right? Like the person threatening to leave the abuse or questioning why they're being treated this way. They will always say, you're not, the perpetrator will often say, you're never going to get another partner like me. I'm a great person. I'm the best person you're ever going to meet, And I think with cults, it's elevated even more because this concerns your salvation. This concerns your spiritual well-being, not just your emotional or romantic prospects. So thank you for that. Tenzin, would you like to expand on this?
Yes, and also pick up some points. I would say part of the cultic tactic is, which you can also find in Rigpa, is to empower the teacher as the unfailing authority, and the student, as long as he is in line with the teacher, is correct. But if he is not, it's only the fault of the student. So basically, disempowering the student and empowering the teacher. Everything what the teacher does is correct. And if the student sees a fault with the teacher, it's only the fault of the student, but not of the teacher. It can't be the fault of the students, must be a delusion of the student. It can't be a fault of the teachers, must be a fault of the student, and it's a delusion, expression of the delusion of the student. And in this way, the teacher becomes omnipotent and unfailing, and the student can only err when he's not in line with we said in communist, with the party line. And then everything good is coming from the teacher, not necessarily from the qualities of the student. So it's all ascribed to the high power and qualities of the teacher. And everything bad the student experiences is because of his negativity, or because of his negative karma, or because of his restriction, can never be because the teacher made a fault. I think this is a key dynamic in this. And then this relationship, or this type of overpowering the teacher and unpowering the student, is based on what I said initially with the manipulation of the student, that he loses trust in his own institution, that he loses self-esteem, and can only see the teacher as an authority and not even his own intellectual faculties, which are able to distinguish wrong from right. And actually, this is the quality of a student, to be intelligent, to be able to discriminate wrong from correct teachings. This is one of the three qualities mentioned by Ayadeva. A student of the Dharma must be unbiased, not taking unpartisan, should not take sides to a tradition or have aversion to another one. He must be intelligent, or she must be intelligent to discriminate wrong from correct teachings. And the third quality is effort. She or he must strive for the goal of awakening. With these qualities, the student is best protected. But what student has the intelligence, when he listens to any Buddhist teacher, to say, this is a wrong teaching, this is not in the text? This is totally deviates from, let's say, mainstream Buddhism. Nobody usually has this. So this might be difficult qualities to be established, but they would protect the student. Now, my example was like this. A friend realized when I go to this group that I'm, pulled into the group. What would you say? Drawn, sucked into the group.
Yeah, sucked in. Yeah, sucked in.
And that I lose connection with my friends, my family, and so on. And they were concerned. So one of them made an appointment with the cult authority in Berlin, from the state, from the Berlin government. And they said, there's nothing against this group in our records, but we have 9 signs to detect if there is a cult. And if only one sign applies, you should be very careful. So he gave me the signs, and 8 of 9 signs showed they are a cult. So what I did, I went to the teacher directly and said, by the way, I was at this cult authority. This is a cult. This is a cult because they said it directly. And then the teacher said like this, Buddhism is a cult. Buddhism is a world religion. And then actually, my birth name is Michael, and you, Michael, you wanted to develop spirituality. You want to become a spiritual person. Now you want to establish a spiritual path by relying on mundane beings who don't have a clue about spirituality, who don't have a clue about Buddhism, and even are jealous of Buddhism. These Catholic priests, she was thinking I was at a Catholic priest, which was not true. So she undermined the authority of the authority of the authority, the authority of this office. And then she saw
Old watchdog.
She saw doubts in my mind about this, if they have authority. And then also, you want to be, she used my longing for spirituality to increase these doubts. You wanted to develop spiritual, but now you follow mundane beings. Isn't this in contradiction with your aims? So, and then by this, she established some doubts about the reliability of this information. And there was some truth in it, because I wanted to leave behind these mundane things, blah, blah, blah. And then in the evening teaching, the teacher said, you think sometimes my perception is wrong. But actually, the Buddha said our perception is totally wrong. We cannot rely on our perception. And there is a truth in this too, if you look from the ultimate point of view, the inherent existence and so on. And so you are already in the realm of fuzziness. And now you have the openness to work on yourself. You want to leave behind all patterns of thinking. You open yourself to this authority, Buddhist authority, and then they start to manipulate you, your trust in yourself, your reliance to outer sources of information, and make you gradually more and more dependent to this teacher. And this is how I got sucked into this cult. So, and on the way, it was, of course, the teacher is a Buddha. Every error you see in the teacher is the projection of your own mind. It only shows the limitation of your own mind. And you cannot achieve enlightenment or awakening when you see faults in your teacher. Only if you see your teacher as a Buddha. So therefore, hence, the teacher is perfect and you are totally imperfect. And on the way, it's a long-term process. You give up your discriminating awareness. It actually is this wisdom what you give up to discriminate right from wrong. And then you manipulate yourself. And this is done in a group context with a high dynamic. So, and at the end, you even believe how you manipulate yourself until the reality shows you are on a totally wrong path. The teacher is not enlightened. He behaves more, even worse than a mundane being. It's not a total narcissistic power trip. But you need at one point this confrontation to wake up from the delusion what you believed in. I mean,
I think
shortcut what I have to share here. Maybe I don't know if this makes sense and if you can follow.
Yeah, you've also highlighted this idea of the confrontation, the initial encounters between the leader or their inner circle or their trusted acolytes and the seeker. I think there's often an element of, on one side, a subtle undermining of your trust in yourself and your faith in your own moral compass and kind of free will, while at the same time there are certain aspects of display of awe or insight that initially actually might appear quite legitimate, and they truly do impress the seeker, and they really actually they might say something actually quite encouraging. They might say something actually quite insightful. But as time goes by, they start to pair this up with a gradual. First, it's subtle, and then it becomes blatant, undermining your trust in yourself. And so there's always that kind of cutting you while also building you up, but it's kind of like it's a very 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 insidious manipulation that actually many people, I don't claim to be able to see through it myself. I don't know if I would be able to see through it if I was in the thick of it, or at the mercy of someone who really knew what they were doing. So we're talking about like personal experiences, and you feel free to share it. And as I understand, both Michael and Tenzin, you are from the Vajrayana tradition, and you've actually started to allude to some of these concepts that could be construed as cultic behavior. That could be construed as leading to certain cultic behaviors. My own thing I find very fascinating is this idea of the teacher as the Buddha, the living Buddha. Now, let me make it very clear. I understand that it's a core teaching of Vajrayana Buddhism, and I'm not questioning it in that sense. I think it's very important to the structure and teaching and philosophy. But I think in the hands of someone who abuses it, certain things like this could end up being a self-justifying system. Is self-justification, just an endless perpetuation of one's own infallibility. Is that an indication of cultic behavior? Michael?
Well, very much so, because when you talk about, when I talk about Mahayana and Vajrayana, they're the same thing. Vajrayana is a subset, from my point of view, an experience of Mahayana. And Mahayana, so how do we get to this point where we have a living Buddha, or we're supposed to see the teacher? They're just basically, you just lay it on your students with some statements like, if you see me as a human, you get the blessings of a human. But if you see me as a Buddha, you get the blessings of a Buddha. So it's a little bit childish, really, if you think about it. It's like, you're going to accept that on its face value. You're already, by accepting that, you've entered the realms of magical thinking. If you just, what is even a blessing? What is a mantra? what is a mantra can have a psychological, scientific explanation. By the way, psychology is pseudoscience, not science, but it's still very mixed. It has, neuropsychology, and they love to take these things for new students and say, all right, are there any neuropsychologists? How can we Dharma explain it with science? But then you'll get like convinced. So there'll be some kind of indoctrinating into this idea of why does looking at the teacher and setting your mind in a certain mode psychologically, and even with they would throw down these like things like mirror neurons, which is just merely, from when I looked it up, what are mirror neurons? They're just like the neurons that are used by the eyes of animals to like fly together, or dances to mirror each other. It's very fast. But some teacher like Daniel Goldman had said something to Sogyal, said like mirror neurons maybe has something to do with when people sit in the right posture while you sit, introducing them to this nature of mind thing. That there's a wisdom transference, right? So like this is another very bizarre idea that wisdom magically transfers. But anyway, so that's basically why you would see them as Buddha, to get that the wisdom transference, which is a kind of a blessing. So then all these reasons are given to you, and even some kind of vague scientific reason, which, by the way, mirror neurons have nothing to do. And I showed them, this is what mirror neurons are according to science and research. And they were the script writers, because that's what they had, script writers, to like put all the best things that they could say that they observe are effective, in the Dharma talks, would say, yeah, but we didn't say that this is what mirror neurons. We just said that Daniel Goleman said it to Sogyal. So I said, so then what you're basically saying is you're lying, because you can rely on this hearsay as a reason and then just put it down to a conversation that happened elsewhere. So, all right. So then this thing of a Buddha, then you look for look for it in text, and it's in text everywhere, isn't it? So maybe Tenzin Peljor can mention that there are a lot of texts telling you that too. So they don't, if you don't like it, someone will Dharma explain it to you and say, yeah, but this text says it. My favorite teacher, Patrul Rinpoche, on the one hand, he explains that to be a Vajra master, you have to be qualified. And being qualified is nigh impossible. You will not find anyone ever in this world. And even the Dalai Lama has said there isn't. But at the same time, in the same text, he'll talk about how you relate to your teacher as a Vajra master. So because he had one, and we want to emulate that, then we just very rapidly resolve to just, I'll just worry about if he's qualified later, and everyone else thinks he's qualified, so he must be qualified. Or just completely avoid determination.
In this respect, I think our discussion is actually broadening to sort of certain dilemmas or tensions within the Vajrayana tradition about what it means to be a qualified teacher, and how do you actually define it. Now, I also have this question after listening to you, Michael, about the difference between magical thinking, right, and genuine participation in religious rituals, and the construction of spiritual community, the notion of participation in specific consecrations and aspects of religious life that I think have been present in Buddhism for since the beginning. It's a difficult question. How do you distinguish between those. Tenzin, do you have any thoughts on what Michael has been, on the issues that Michael has been raising?
Yes. I think another sign of cults is a black and white thinking. They lack nuance, differentiation, and complexity, thinking from terms of complexity. And this is, you can find this then by, there are groups like a Bible group who take the Bible literally.
Yeah.
They take the teachings about the teacher is a Buddha literally. He is. But then nuanced teachers, like for instance, one of my teachers, Rinpoche Rinpoche, he said, seeing the teacher as a Buddha is a training. Some of them say you only see him when he is on the throne or when he is giving the transmission, but not in daily life. And these nuances and differentiations are not given in the cults because they don't serve the purpose to make the student dependent on the leader and the group. And then, so I think this is one point, because then when you understand this, there is also a meditation by Atisha, where you deliberately reflect the faults of the teacher.
Yes.
But then you also say, okay, but I don't get inspired so much by the faults. That's why now I look on the qualities which serve as my inspiration. And then you have a more holistic view on the teacher. And actually having a holistic view, you are in contact with reality and not with projections.
Yeah.
So, and from my experience, I really practice it literally to see the teacher as a Buddha. And it clashed in total ways with reality. It didn't work with two teachers. And afterwards, I found out I have even more problems with these teachers, because the teachings say, don't practice compassion for your teacher because your teacher is enlightened, and practicing compassion for your teacher is inappropriate. And at the end, I had compassion and love really in a broad sense. But the only people in the whole world I excluded from my training were my two teachers. So I had to readjust my path by seeing my teachers as human beings with qualities and faults. And then after I had a more realistic view of my former cult teachers, I was able to have compassion, love for them, to forgive them, to let them go. I don't have any grudge anymore, but it wouldn't have helped me to continue to see them as Buddhas.
It is very interesting. I think to see, and I speak as a Mahayana Chinese Buddhist, right? And we don't have the guru tradition in Chinese Buddhism, at least not today, not in mainstream Chinese Buddhism. But it would seem, but what you seem to be implying is that to see a teacher as a perfect being, as a Buddha, can actually be dehumanizing. It can actually lead to an even worse place, where you are simultaneously seeing them as divine, but as they commit, as they do all these kinds of unethical and wrong things, you hate them. You start to, you lose your human empathy for them. And then that is actually unproductive on both sides. As far as I understand what you were saying, only by seeing them as human beings and meditating on them as fellow sentient beings can you actually be able to deal with the problems on a human level and see their faults, see their
Yes, Raymond, I want to pick up on this, because tantric view is not only seeing the teacher as a Buddha, but also seeing yourself as a Buddha and all sentient beings as a Buddha. And as I asked different types, my Vajrayana teachers, if I see every human being as a Buddha, how can I practice compassion? They were not able to give me a satisfying answer.
Wow.
All sentient beings are Buddha. How can I practice compassion? This doesn't work. I mean, so my main emphasis was developing compassion. I had certain reasons why I wanted to work more on this. And I realized how much this tantric view does not really support my training in compassion. So I put it more in the background. And later
Yeah.
I realized, and I only practiced seeing the teacher as a Buddha because this was almost, you must do it. But I realized also this doesn't really work.
You've highlighted perhaps a philosophical tension within Mahayana and Vajrayana, the idea of seeing, a different perception. You just change the perception, and then all beings are Buddhas. But that in terms of temporal reality, and in terms of actually generating the bodhicitta required for the liberation, I'm not sure how that works. But anyway, it's a very important point that perhaps Sattva Talks might be interested to take up in a future discussion. Michael, so I don't have a particular question regarding cults at the moment, but I think we're trying to tease out some of the cultic inclinations that are we're identifying within Vajrayana and within Buddhism as a whole. Perhaps are there any other things that you wanted to note about that you found prominent?
Yes. By the way, I switched my internet. Not keeping up, so I don't know how
Yeah. Hopefully,
clear
hopefully fast.
but it's clearer now. I hope it was.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
So, I can get very dramatic because it was very dramatic what happened, and so I want to bring, since have that Dharma or drama thing. I think let's look at drama. Okay, if you experience something that you can't explain, right? Somebody said my internet's a bit slow, right? If you experience something you can't explain, that can really shake you up. Okay, that can be something that you need to reach out for mentors to interpret for you, or to tell you that you're not crazy, or so when that happens to people, they all have different ways of responding to it. Some people just deny it. Some people get advice, and that's a great opportunity for a teacher who with a poor motivation, let's say, like us, to reinterpret it as, well, we're very connected in this like drone-like voice that they have. We're very connected. That means you should do this and that. And maybe you should move here. There's a lot of opportunity for you. Or it could be that someone just says, right, well, that happened, and so for me now, from now on, I'm going to have complete faith in this teacher because it happened in their presence. And so when something really dramatically wrong happens, like an obvious, very public display of physical abuse, for example, punching someone, and then then it creates a discussion like, what, this is wrong, right? You accept it. People would, I found for myself, trying to talk people around, that they would say, well, I had this experience in the past, and so I can never go back. And that was reinforced a lot in the teachings itself. Just like a snake in a tube example in Vajrayana. Once you do these initiations, only bad things can come if you try to go backwards. You can't back out of the tube. You've got to go all the way to enlightenment, and that means you commitment to this group and that teacher and this teaching, that practice. So for me to extricate myself, I also, and I will share if you want me to, if Tenzin thinks it's appropriate, kind of experience. Just nod if you want me to show my magical experience or not. But I don't know. See, even to talk about it, it's like a reification, perhaps, for people who are like, but things like telepathy, telepathy. With a lot of people, maybe it's just a kind of a sideshow trick, because this is the kind of thing that you would want to be able to pull off. But I experienced one time when I was like, they say something, and you hear it, and then it bounces around in your mind, and I'm trying to do this. And it's like I'm thinking that, something that was put in my head before. And then they just call out your name, and it just happens that they say, like, he turned around, looked straight at me and said exactly what I was thinking to me, and made me stand up and do all kinds of funny things. Because it was like a really long Vajrayana chanting practice, visualization,
Wow.
holding instruments. And so for me, that felt very strongly like he read my mind, and it wasn't the first time. But later, I've had to think, how could it be more of an effect, like it's a trick, or some people can't. So people, it's like this for me. I think that they know that people will have experiences. It's even in a lot of the teachings. You have, meditative experiences, which could be anything. They don't even have a definition of what they are. They're just things that happen, which you should not become attached to. So then that's the teaching. Don't become attached to the experiences. But people do. They get super attached, and that becomes an immovable block of logic that, because that happened, then that means that probably all the other things that they said, like what will happen to me if I leave or stop doing the practice, and that harm will come to me or something, like threats.
Yeah.
Then they become like locked in. So that's the problem of magical thinking. It starts off normal. I mean, we all probably want to go to Harry Potter world, have spells and things, but it's a natural human thing to read fantasy novels and stuff. But really do get it. The kind of Dharma I really felt safe with was like things like Old Path, White Clouds, where Thich Nhat Hanh had removed all of the supernatural things, and it was coming down more to just conversations about what are the most important things, qualities and things like that, rather than displays of magic.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So then later, I got moved over into the magical thinking eventually. So that's very common.
Yeah. Speaking as someone who did take the 5 mindfulness trainings, the basic refuge, I will probably the equivalent of Plum Village. I do think, that for, no institution is perfect, but I think that one of the best things that Thich Nhat Hanh did was to demystify his expression of Buddhism. And I think, even though it might have been out of necessity for its import into France and then the broader West, I think, his emphasis on mindfulness, ethics, and, compassion really is very non-abusive. I see in it a very gentle and loving expression of Buddhism, even in the aspects where he talks about faith and prayer and devotion. So that's one thing that I would like to say about Thich Nhat Hanh, I think. And I think what you're talking about with magical thinking is, I think everyone seeks hope. Human life, as the Buddha taught, is suffering. It's dukkha, it's futility. It is inherently, everything that we do on this planet, in our life, is to some degree an attempt to cope with our mortality. And so I think magical thinking in certain ways is a part of the human condition. Where it becomes dangerous is when I think the cultic agents, they kind of exploit it to condition you to behave and to be forced into a certain lifestyle. Tenzin, what thoughts do you have about what Michael has just said, and does cultic thinking force you or condition you to think in a certain way that makes you more vulnerable?
I think what I want to relate to what Michael said is about experience. This is a key point.
Sure.
If you look into the book by Robert J. Lifton, who did research on totalitarianism, about Shugo Ashihara. Shugo Ashihara, I mean, he became a mass murderer, not the sarin gas attack. And the students he had, they made extraordinary experiences in his presence. And even after it became known and established as fact that he is a mass murderer, I mean, finally he was, I think, he got death sentence, they could not relate their experience to the reality that they had a crazy guru. Because they clinged so much on their experience. And the experience is true, therefore the other things must not be true. They couldn't cope with these two realities. And here's a key point. You can make, even in the presence of a totally fanatic, crazy guy, like you did Waco massacre in Texas, the one who saw himself as Jesus Christ. People make good experience in his presence. They love him. They give up their life for him. And the question is, how can this come? And my explanation is this is basically based on the condition of the student. The student is full of hope, desire, and the student has Buddha nature. And like you can have a healing effect by trusting in a drug which doesn't have the power to heal you, still the placebo can heal you because you have the faith in something which doesn't have the quality, you heal you. And the same happens with an unqualified teacher. And then the problem in these groups is people make this extraordinary experience with this teacher. They cling to this experience, and then moreover, it is said this is because of the teacher, not because of your Buddha nature or because of your openness. Therefore, if you leave the teacher, you can never make any experience like this again. So this again serves as a means to bound you more to the group. And behind it is basically clinging to superficial, though still profound experience. I call it superficial because they don't last so long. They fade away sooner or later. So, and basically it's a type of attachment. Yeah. And this is actually contrary to Dharma. These teachers increase your attachment, your hope. It expresses in you, you have more hopes, more hope to find salvation there and more fears to go outside of the circle. So this experience issue is a big, big thing which should be considered. And this is also important to acknowledge. I made these good extraordinary experience with the teacher. Now, very short only on the case with the supernatural things. For me, of course, clairvoyance exists, and I lived with a Lama for 1 month together. He had clairvoyance and healing power. I mean, he slept in my bed. I translated for him. I know really what he were able to do. And I tell this deliberately because I don't like that this aspect is being put aside, though from my own experience it exists. But there is a type of magical thinking which is interpreting common events and puts more on it than there is, and this becomes dangerous. So you have a reinterpretation of the world like someone who becomes a maniac and he sees more things in the things than there are out there. And this can carry you away in a totally deluded world. So one must be very careful in these regards. On the one hand, these supernatural aspects exist. Sometimes they also don't exist for certain people, but they claim to have it. And this becomes a very muddy water to move in this. But I think a key point is these experiences exist, but they don't necessarily reflect qualities of a teacher. They might more reflect your own qualities.
Yeah. Well, actually, you raised one of them. What I think a distinguishing point of actually identifying a religious teacher who is not a cultic person, who is not enough, he will actually say, he or she will actually say that religious experiences are not the point. Religious experiences are not definitive to the spiritual path. Yeah. And I think that's one of the key markers of distinguishing. I would you've talked about identifying, like these teachers who or people or institutions that could be considered cultic. I think it's also natural to ask who can you trust? Who can we trust? Who can we consider not cultic? Who can we consider reliable? And we're not going to use the traditional definitions, like as you said, who's qualified as a spiritual teacher? I think the definition is quite vague. Michael, do you have any thoughts about this? Like, who can?
It's like you're reading my mind, man. We're in sync. We're in sync on a naturally flowing into potential segues or topics. But yeah, so then right. There's one thing the nun said that I really liked, even though it was weird. I had positive and negative reaction at the same time, which is we shouldn't talk about things that we don't know for real or haven't experienced for ourselves.
Yes,
that's just ludicrous. Like, we have to talk about things that we experience for ourselves, but we should be clear what we shouldn't make stuff up. That was the point. I think I like the way she said that. So I try to, as much as possible, draw on my own experiences, but then it also kind of feels narcissistic, telling your own stories, because of this teachers spend so much time telling stories of what happened to them. That's their bread and butter. But anyway, my story to answer what you're saying, who can we trust? Who can we go to? Is sad, because some people that I trusted a lot and thought would help me and acted like they were, turned out to be not on my side at all. Basically, everyone in Vajrayana Buddhism that I talked to would seem like open and listening, but they were just like, I don't know, it's really hard to talk about because it sounds extreme. It sounds like I'm going to say, I don't know, there's thousands of teachers out there. But that itself, how many of them have this Rinpoche title? It's like this Rinpoche title is worth money and power, right?
Yes.
You, God-man status, like that. So what? So then at first a few people did it, and then it just, the stigma of lying about it seemed to vanish, and more people, their students would often be the ones that would want their teacher to be a Rinpoche. So then they start calling him that, and then because they do that, he kind of doesn't stop them, and then now he's a Rinpoche. So that in itself just shows that isn't really valuable anymore.
Yeah.
It means precious one. It's supposedly it's like only a few beings that are very they have returned after death. They're redirected to a human birth where they would get to study the Dharma and have the potential to be spread more and continue on their path. So that's really one of the things about Vajrayana is this sort of it means that you commit for more than one lifetime, which seems a bit hard. That's hard to take, really.
Yeah.
But it just naturally flows. It naturally flows in the vows, and so sometimes they would throw new prayers and new lines, like the refuge prayer turned into, I will obey my master, near the end when I left. And I remember sitting there, in the prayers, refuge taking thing, looking at these screens with that on there and not saying it, at the risk of being noticed to not say it by all the people around me, and fuming that they'd gone to that point of changing such a basic prayer to one of but that's also selling a kind of so it's a circle, right, of teachers that you become connected to in the Nyingma.
Yes.
Nyingma teachers, and who have all studied with the same head guru, root gurus, become your brothers and sisters, almost like on an equal level, even though it depends who's sitting there. So then I would go to those different teachers after I left and ask things, and they would always be trying to get me to come back somewhere or meet someone. And I was too scared to. I was like, it took me so long to get away that I don't feel safe in a person-to-person situation. I wanted to communicate via writing so that everything could be dismantled, or I could say, but you said this because it's written here. You said it.
It is frightening, and I can see
And
your
that
rationale.
nobody likes to do that. People don't like to do it, right?
Yeah.
So they don't like to be on record. So this comes, if you look at the Dalai Lama, right? He has these meetings, and it's a really big deal lately in the groups that I'm in, where the Dalai Lama has in the past met people about abusive lamas. So everyone pretty much looks to the Dalai Lama as a good person. So we have to trust him. So even that is being questioned by a lot of people lately, because he met people and they talked and they wrote a letter. He suggested they wrote a letter focusing what they wanted to change, and he would put his name with their signatures. And then he went away, and the next thing they heard was that he took his name off and wouldn't have his name. And then it happened again later. So people feel a little bit like this. I'm not putting anything in writing. It's all got to be on. It happens on video, but it doesn't. I don't know what it is. It's just that kind of thing has undermined my trust of all these teachers. Is that you can't really get into a kind of a public, open discourse about these questions. So then I stopped looking for reliable teachers in the Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhism, and I just decided that I should not rely on myself as the teacher, but then again, if you're a student who has to generate discernment and decide what is a false teaching, aren't you being your own teacher anyway? In the end, you have to decide for yourself. So this teacher, what even is a teacher, is a little bit interesting to me to hear what you guys think. A teacher has different definitions, spiritual friend, study partner, mentor. Yes. Then there's this other side where it's like obey, and like Tenzin said, they're an infallible source of trust where you have an ego which has to be destroyed. So then don't rely on yourself anymore, and then you take vows to not rely on yourself, your parents, but only on this teacher. So that's all very clearly delineated stuff. But I don't want that teacher. People just get forced into that. So you just want a study partner, but you end up with.
Yes. I would like to ask these teachers what they think of the Buddha's last words, which was basically, the Dharma will be your greatest teacher. As far as I understand, the Buddha never emphasized, single-minded devotion to a single person. And I do wonder, whether the Buddha himself might have thought of something like that as, somewhat questionable. I think we are starting to run out of time. I would like to invite both of our guests to sort of provide some perhaps concluding thoughts about this, about cults, and about the danger of cultic inclinations within Buddhism, because we are setting up the talk, a discussion for a later time about the manifestations of these behaviors. Tonight we have spent much time delving into what we have found as cultic definitions. And I think soon, if they let me on here again, I will be I will be discussing with guests manifestations exactly of what that means, the implications. So Tenzin,
Raymond, I have to add something to what Michael said. Is this okay?
Yes, sure. Yeah. Let's finish up and please continue.
Because there are 3 points I noted I want to address.
Sure.
I try to make it brief, not longer than 5 minutes, so you can stop me or interrupt me if I get too much lost in details.
Yeah.
One point I want to mention, it's important to understand that there are people who have qualities. Sometimes they call it siddhis. There are people who have healing siddhis. There are people who have a siddhi to have a type of clairvoyance and so on. They have uncommon qualities. And at the same time, they can have a super thick ego. And as a student, you will have benefit from these siddhis, but you will be harmed by the egoistic behavior. And in the beginning, you cannot really distinguish this. This is part of reality, what I'm experienced myself, and also a friend of myself who went to a lot of healing gurus in the Hinduist tradition. There were some people with extraordinary healing siddhis, but a total lack of compassion and very manipulative. So you can have both extremely gifted person, like in music or art. You have it in spirituality, and at the same time, a super thick, egoistic mind with a lot of delusion, needs and desires. And they will use your needs to satisfy their own needs, and they will use their special ability to attract you.
Yes.
So, and some of these qualities are not existing out there because they claim to have it, though they don't have it, but some they really have these qualities. And this is also another thing you must distinguish. Now, your question about what you should do how to find trust in a new teacher, I think it's important to look what is the meaning of faith in Buddhism. It's really good to look in the Abhidharma. I make it very brief. I give the abbreviated version. There are 3 types of faith. The first type of faith is to see the really existing qualities of something. So if I see the qualities of compassion, the qualities of love, the qualities of collectedness or concentration, samadhi in Sanskrit, I can have a feeling, can be moved by these qualities so that I get goosebumps, tears in the eyes, my hair stands on end, and so on. And the same can happen if I meet a teacher who is a bearer of quality, which actually is the meaning of guru, is heavy in qualities. And then if these qualities are really existing there, and if they are stable qualities, I can put my faith in these qualities. Yeah. If they are stable, my faith can never be misplaced. If they are not stable, it can be misplaced. So that's why you need to check what qualities are stable in my teacher. And then on the way, you realize here he has stable qualities, but here he has really some limitations, like bias, a prejudice against women or something like this. Or he doesn't really have a logical thinking sometimes when it comes to things like abuse. He doesn't have any knowledge because he is not interested in it, and he does not put energy into understanding it. That's why here he is in a type of ignorance, darkness, but here he is full of qualities. And then if I relate to this reality, I can place my faith into something which is stable and good and sustaining, and protect myself to put my faith into something which is not really existing out there, and then have all these pains coming from the disillusionment and disappointment and so on. So that's why I think it's important to check what really qualities are out there. And this is the basis of faith, the really existing qualities. And this might take time. And a person who has really existing qualities, it does not deny he also has limitations, but you don't put your faith in the limitations. Actually, you can say this is also a type of faith because you have a conviction these limitations really exist, and I must protect myself and others from it, or you address it even towards the teacher, or you ask someone else to address it. Right. So this is basically what I wanted to say to this. And then I have a third point. I make it short. Michael, I really dived into this with the signing of the letter of the Dalai Lama. And this art documentary is wrong in this case, and Stephen Peljor is also wrong. They showed only part of the documentary, and he said, yes, I will support it or sign something, but at the end of the conference, they asked, what is the outcome of the conference? And the only thing he agreed to was to write a preface for a book and nothing else. And Alexander Berzin was the co-writer of this letter with Stephen Peljor, and I met Alexander Berzin in Berlin. He didn't see the documentary, and I asked him, why did the Dalai Lama not sign this letter of the teachers? And he said immediately to me, it was never meant he signed it. He said very clearly he cannot sign it because he is not the Pope. He cannot impose his view on others. And it was made from the beginning very clear he can never sign a letter. And I don't know, Alexander Berzin said, who sent the letter to the office of the Dalai Lama. It was not meant to go this way. And I have no clue how this came out. And this was confirmed, by the way, also by Thupten Schödren, who was also part of the conference. And I confronted Stephen Peljor. You said this in the documentary. Other witnesses say contrary to what you say. Can you please explain what's going on? Maybe 30 years ago, there is some type of confusion. I wrote 2 times. He never replied to it. So I think this information is not correct and is what to say, a little bit misleading also. So sorry, I'm
happy to hear that the different side for that, because it is, if we want to have more open discussions, like the Dalai Lama has shown the will to have open discussions many times, and he has openly criticized Tibet society, as you know. I don't want to say exactly what he said, but he expressed that things are wrong, or even in my case, he said my teacher is disgraced, like that. Which at the time I had no other ally, so then he was the only one that I was at that many years relying upon, waiting for something to change. But then people don't understand how long these things take. They might take lifetimes. Change. But the thing about Rigpa is they developed a code of ethics as a response to all the criticism, but then they cut lamas of this Rinpoche class from being, they don't have to follow any of that. They're basically immune or excluded from the code of ethics, which sucks completely. It's terrible. It's like, why did you? Because they're the only people it should apply to. That was the need. That's why it was needed, because they were being unethical, and then they develop it and they just apply it to the students. So again, it reinforces what Tenzin said about students being to blame as the ones who made the mistakes. So I wanted to just say, because it's just the last answer to what Tenzin just said too, that if you do a lot of retreat and meditation, then these common cities, which are not enlightened cities, they're ordinary cities, that is likely to happen to you or someone else in the group. So it's a very common experience. So that doesn't mean that you're necessarily there yet, but it's like a signpost that the practice does something. So those practices, it's kind of useful actually that those things do happen. But then it's abused as a reason by when you go to someone and you trust as a kind of they can use it against you basically. When you ask what it's all about.
Well, I think this is a very profound final point. I'd like to thank you both, Michael, Tenzin, for a very sobering discussion. I just see that we have a feedback from Mr. Sean Campbell, who posted a comment, and he watched our previous stream on celibacy. I'm still in a quandary over sexual abuse by masters of their students. I attend the Dharma Center, Kagyu Tekchen Ling, founded by Venerable Kalu Rinpoche the Elder. In my 30 years of occasional attachment to the center, I heard many of the Sangha here tell me what a luminary Kalu Rinpoche was, though I had no idea of the magnitude of his contributions in bringing and then it sort of cuts off. I can't read the rest of the Facebook post. It seems to have cut off, but perhaps that warrants some comment if either of you know of Venerable Kalu Rinpoche or Kagyu Tekchen Ling.
There's a lot of accusations against him of sexually abusing many women, and maybe men too. So if you explore most of the Tibet, it's common to find that. So I don't like saying that because it sounds generalized, you know. You have to be precise. So I've heard, I don't know, and then the emanation or the reincarnation Tulku for Kalu Rinpoche also himself was sexually abused. So he's like so that says something about the group that was responsible for looking after and caring for him and his training, that there was so much corruption that he himself was sexually abused. It adds to my confidence that the stories have something to them.
Yes.
But I can't be an authority and give any kind of
yes.
It's only hearsay. But at the same time, hearsay is not. This is not a legal court. We have to listen to. That's the thing about Me Too. We have to listen to victims and not just go, "Oh, that's just hearsay," and we're not allowed to talk about what this victim said. We have to say, "Well, there are victims talking about this, so they need to be cared for," and that means listening to them and not just dismissing them, especially.
That's a very, very sobering thought. And I'd like to thank you, Michael and Tenzin, for offering such thought-provoking and very sobering and important observations to this important matter. On the 30th of April, I will, as the team has kindly reminded me, I will be hosting another stream for Sattva. And we will discuss this further. We will take it further and move into the next topic, which will be truly about the sexual scandals that culminate after we have examined this cultic behavior and the celibacy issue from these last episodes. So I would like to sorry, there seems to be one more comment.
Continuation of it.
Yeah, Mr. Sean Campbell says, bringing Tantric Vajrayana Buddhism to the West. Only in my last couple of years of intensified study about Vajrayana did I become aware of the accusations of sexual abuse against Kalu Rinpoche the Elder by his students, as exposed by June Campbell, his longtime translator and sexual consort, in her feminist treatise and expose. I have also spoken personally with Kyabje Kalu Rinpoche, the Elder's putative reincarnate, about his sexual molestation by his Buddhist teachers during his monastic training. I assume that's what the word says. And then again, it cuts off. But this is just more very pertinent to your point about the endemic problem.
Raymond, I think with the Kalu Rinpoche, I think it's important what Michael said. People should take June Campbell seriously. She is a witness. She experienced the abuse. People should listen or read her book and get to know what she has to say. I know a person who was together with June Campbell, a journalist and a publisher. And this person said really she was traumatized at the time. She shows all the signs of trauma. You cannot fake these signs so easily. And there is no reason to be devoted Dharma student and later to fake trauma.
Yeah.
People who go to the Dharma, they want to have a change. They want to be honest. So then the people should take survivors of abuse honest. And with Karu Rinpoche, they could just start with June Campbell's book, because this is an eyewitness personal account, and putting it also into context in an academic sense, because it's a published book, it's also academic. So basically, I want to add this and pick up on what Michael said, but we cannot go further because otherwise it gets too long today.
Yeah, I think in the future, I hope we talk about things like what is it like to be shunned, what you can expect, what you can do, and things like that, for people who are on the edge of leaving and thinking about they should like get some advice.
Yeah.
How do you be careful so that you can like move forward, or perhaps retain what is healthy and start processing what is not healthy.
Absolutely. And so I think on that note, please, if you have stuck with us throughout this sensitive discussion, please join us again for even more drama on the 30th of April. We will be delving deeper into this, and perhaps the name of June Campbell will be popping up, given how Mr. Campbell's comment has come so fortuitously into the conversation. So with that last observation, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Truly, I hope you found this discussion to be productive and of some insight, despite the grim nature of the topic. As I understand, we have our Sherab, co-founder of Sattva, coming in to close out the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond, for your excellent moderation.
Yes, thank you very much.
Sherab?
Let's go with the dedications.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for a very inspiring and productive discussion. Thank you, Venerable Tenzin Peljor. Thank you, Michael. And thank you for your good moderation, Raymond. So we hope to have this kind of more sensitive but, a valid discussion in the future, especially issues around scandals and, cults and difficult issues. As I've been always talking to Venerable Tenzin and Michael, this is indeed the first good beginning in Buddhism. Yeah. To clean up and speak up.
It's non-harmful discussion, certainly. We will keep it. That's our
and we
basic
discuss
principles.
things in a positive way and with the motivation of healing the whole society as a whole. Yeah. I hope this is the correct direction that we're heading. Thank you so much for everybody. So let's hear some dedication prayer and some event announcement. Okay, on the next week, on the 16th of April, there will be a guided Zen meditation guided by Myung An Sunim with the title of Compassion for Yourself and Difficult People. This is quite a relevant title as well, since we are talking about difficult issues today. So let's hear from maybe Michael first about your dedication for tonight's dialogue. Michael?
I'm going to just freely say I direct my mind to be able to have the skill in communication to help anyone that's listening who's suffering from cult abuse to recognize the way forward and leave the past behind slowly and safely.
Wonderful.
And Venerable Tenzin Peljor?
Yeah, may the supreme mind of the great compassion and the two bodhicittas arise where they have not arisen. May they not diminish where they have arisen, and grow more and more in the minds of all sentient beings and in ourselves.
Thank you.
And I also, in this spirit, also dedicate this episode and our activity and discussion tonight specifically to those suffering gaslighting, psychological abuse, and struggling to find a way out of their internal suffering. Thank you.
Thank you. Now recite the four great vows. Sentient beings are numberless. We vow to save them all. Delusions are endless, we vow to cut through them all. The teachings are infinite, we vow to learn them all. The Buddha way is inconceivable, we vow to attain it. May all beings be well, happy, and safe. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. See you guys next time. Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Good night,
Good night.
everyone.
Good night. Top and